You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Harsha, and thank you again for tuning in for another episode of Changing Reality. We're super excited to have all of you, a lovely audience here once again on this lovely Thursday evening, if you guys are on the Penn campus or wherever that is in your part of the world. So today we've got a very, very special interview in store for all of you with someone who's actually an alumni from the University of Pennsylvania. But before we get to that, for all of our new viewers here, I just want to say welcome to our Changing Reality family. And if you aren't already aware of it, Changing Reality is a show that features phenomenal people from all walks of life who are changing the world in their own ways. So we'll be hanging out and interviewing social change makers, entrepreneurs, business owners, to even artists, musicians, and top executives from all across the world, and especially here on the Penn campus too. So stay tuned to the show to see the different amazing people that we'll be bringing on. And you get to hear these inspiring stories on how they change not only the lives around them, but do it through things that they're passionate about, things that they're good at. And I wanted to do this show simply because I feel like there are a lot of people out there who do phenomenal things and make waves in the lives of those around them. But we also don't always hear their stories. So through this little platform, I hope that we can see the people who actually put in the work behind the scenes to keep many of the things that you and I enjoy alive and functional for many of us to use in our day-to-day lives. And I'm really passionate about hearing how these people are actually using their own capacities to affect the world around them. Personally, I founded and run a youth movement called Ascendance in Malaysia, which is where I'm from, that collaborates with the Malaysian Ministry of Education to provide alternative education platforms for any student who wants to change their reality. We work with students from elementary all the way up to high school through various sessions, programs, and even experiential learning projects and activities to help them discover their passion, learn about themselves and the world around them, and start their own careers while they're still in school that creates meaningful impact. And to date, we've been fortunate to work with over 10,000 students in 970 communities and have incubated countless number of student-run projects and social enterprises run by students aged 8 to 20 years old. So we help everyday students change their reality, and hopefully this session or this little interview we have will inspire you to change yours too. So do drop it down in the show chat below. The show is brought to you by WQHS Radio, the student-run radio show at the University of Pennsylvania. So how many of us had survived without social media? Personally, I don't think I can, full disclosure. But today we have someone who has done it all. From starting his career in Google to YouTube, he rose in the ranks of the world behind the scenes of our social media mania. And he has held some really top positions, from being the general manager of Vine to the ex-director of product management at Facebook and Twitter. So I'm super glad to welcome Jason Toff to our digital stage. Jason, are you here?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Harsha, for having me.
Yep, we're super excited. How are you feeling? It's been a good day so far.
It's been a good day. I'm recovering from a cold, which is like weird because, like probably many of you, I haven't been sick in like 18 months. But so it's both like it's like a new and old experience. But overall, doing really well. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yes, I remember the days which I used to leave my house before the 18th month started and used to get sick. But all right, I don't envy you. And to all of us watching, I hope that you guys are healthy. And if you are having a cold, that this at least makes you feel like, successful people get sick too. That's fun. About.
For sure.
So to just start off and on the road to your success, I'd say you've been someone who has done so many phenomenal, so many entrepreneurial things in many stages of your life. And you even started an enterprise called Penn Drinks on the Penn campus when you were a student here. Was that the beginning of your entrepreneurship journey, or did it start even before that, in a sense?
It started even before that. It started before I knew what the word entrepreneurship meant, but ever since I was a little kid, I was always fascinated by businesses. And I recall like randomly asking my parents, like, how much does a car cost? Or like, how do we get TV? Like, who do we pay? And it was just like the process was fascinating to me. And I think my earliest thing that resembled a adventure was in elementary school. My parents had like signed me up for weekly tennis lessons, and I wasn't super fond of tennis, but they had a vending machine in the racket club, and I saved up the few dollars I had and would buy stacks from the vending machine and then resell them for a profit to my classmates, which allowed me to get more money and more snacks for myself. So that was my earliest memory of that, and then had various little business type things, selling Lego on eBay and selling my friends' jewelry in high school throughout my childhood. So a number of different experiences. None of them were like crazily successful, but they all taught me things and allowed me to like practice learning how to like write messages to customers and how to like come off as a legitimate business when you're just like a 13-year-old. So lots of learning experiences there.
But that's so cool, and I feel like everyone like every kid would now be inspired. So like you've probably got like vending machines all around the country. Come tomorrow morning are going to be like sold out because everyone's going to be selling them on their services now. So oh no. But other than that, I feel like that's something that all of us would like want to do at the very least. As a kid, like did everyone around you like go like, oh, good job, Jason, or like no, or oh gosh,
no. So at my elementary school, I was having a good time, and the other kids seemed to be happy getting their like lollipops and stuff. But no, one day the principal of my elementary school called my mom and said, "Hey, your son's not allowed to sell stuff on the school bus." I think maybe another parent had complained, like, why is my kid asking for like dollars every day? And then yeah, I remember a talk with my mom where she said, like, Jason, you can't sell these things in the school bus. And I asked her, like, why not? Like, the kids want them. And she had like struggled to come up with an answer for me, which is funny in hindsight. So no, it wasn't always welcome, and it was a bit unusual. Growing up, so I was born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s. And when I was selling things on the internet, that wasn't like a thing. Like online payments were not standardized. So I was receiving checks and money orders, usually just like a verified check. And I wouldn't tell people who I really was. I had a fake name. I changed my last name, 2 characters in my last name, Jason Toss, which is just a different email address, jasontoss@hotmail.com. And I tried to give the illusion that I wasn't like a kid.
Okay, very smart. I mean, you need work on your alter ego naming because
yeah, not super abstract. Yeah,
like I had my suspicions, but like despite all of that, I think that you still went on and you persevered with that entrepreneurship spirit, with that spirit to do awesome things. And if I'm not mistaken, when you're I think 15, you actually co-founded and co-directed this organization called PALS, a nonprofit that actually runs summer camps for teens with Down syndrome. And it expanded from one camp in 2014 to I think it's still like active today with your co-founder running it. So how did you actually start that off as a kid? Even?
Yeah. So the story behind that was my aunt has Down syndrome, my dad's sister, and when I was I don't know, maybe 14 or 15, I went to her 40th birthday party, and so we drove an hour from where we lived to go to my Aunt Karen's 40th birthday party. And it was like they had rented a room, and she had like 6 or 7 friends, and they had like pizza, and it was like a very standard, like basic party. But my Aunt Karen was so happy, and I remember just like feeling changed, probably like the hormones of like teenage youth, like and brain development combined. But I remember on the drive back from the party, I was just like bawling, and I wasn't sad. I was just feeling a lot of emotions of like, wow, I'm this like ingrateful teenager who's like pissed that I can't get the new Game Boy game or whatever, and here is my aunt who is so thrilled to have her family and a handful of friends around her eating pizza. And I felt inspired so much that I was like, how I would like to like befriend some people in my high school from the special education classrooms. And so like the next day I was like, I'm going to go do this. And I was like, how do you do this? Like there's all these social pressures and just like systemic weirdnesses of like I'm not just going to go up to like any random kid, with disability or not, and be like, hey, let's be friends or whatever. And so I went, what I ended up doing is like going to the special education classroom and talking to the teacher and saying like, it's kind of weird, but like, do we have anything where we could like a best buddies type thing where, and she's like, no, we don't. And I was like, well, do you mind if I look into it? And she was like, okay. And so I contacted Best Buddies. At the time, they weren't doing high school chapters. It was like a college focused thing. So I was like, maybe we'll just make our own high school thing. So sent around like a petition to see if there would be enough students interested, asked like whatever powers that be at my high school. And we created this club Pals. And it turned out that there was actually like a lot of interest in this. At our first event, we had something like 120 students, went to a pretty big high school, but still didn't expect that much turnout. And had so much interest from the student body that we ended up having like 2 to 3 buddies or pals, we call them, for every person with a disability. And then, as you mentioned, that developed into what became a summer camp. I pitched this idea to a summer camp owner named Julian Krinsky. He runs a bunch of summer camps in the Philly area. He used to, including some with Penn. And said like, hey, you have business camps, you have tennis camps, you have all these different camps, but like none that really cater to people with developmental disabilities. What do you think about starting one? And he's like, great, let's do it. I'll fund it. Go nuts. And so together with a friend from high school, a guy named Josh Stein, and then a younger woman we met, or a girl at the time, she was, I think, 15, Jenny Newberry, we started this summer camp in 2004 and had 16 campers and 16 counselors paired one-on-one. And it was a blast. And as a teenager, it was like so much fun to like design a summer camp. And it was awesome for the counselors. It was awesome for the campers. It was awesome for the campers' parents, some of whom had told us that they had not had like more than one night away from like their teenage children since they were born. And so it was like, they were able to take vacations. And anyways, it was just an awesome experience. And from there, we just grew little by little every year until we were, I think, at peak for one location, like 130 campers and then like 150 staff. And at that point, it was like unwieldy to like all be in one location because we had like 6 buses and it was just like and so at that point, we expanded to another location. And then luckily, Jenny, one of the co-founders, who went on to Princeton and is this brilliant mind, decided to like devote her career to this. So she's been running the organization full time for the last like decade or so. And as you said, we're now in like a dozen locations, running summer camps and programs throughout the year.
That's amazing. And it's like you built something that even like carried on until today and creates so much meaningful impact. And I can definitely see that whole entrepreneurship vibe coming back like in this story. And like, what made you kind of like take that next step and apply to Wharton or Penn in a sense? Was it just like, did you just Google like business colleges and be like, oh, that's like first thing that popped up? Like, yeah, it makes sense. Or how did you figure that out?
Yeah. So, as the son of 2 Jewish parents and 1 immigrant parent, they were like very focused on where are you going to go to school ever since I was young. And so I was familiar with like a lot of universities early on, like I'm sure many Penn students and alumni were too. And I guess I thought I seem to enjoy this business thing and I'm not terrible at it. So like, where are good business schools? And naturally, Penn had one of the best, and so I applied early, and my parents were very supportive because it was an hour from where I grew up, so it wasn't too far from them to visit.
All right, win-win situation. And when you were in Penn, I know that many people in Penn come in either very lost or very focused. You seem the very focused type. And you, if I'm not mistaken, you actually did a Bachelor of Science in Management, Operations, and Information Management, I think. And with the minor in music, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
how did you come up with this combination in the first place? Like, I get everything, and there was music, and like, how did you pick, in a sense, what was best for you?
yeah. So I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. Actually, the other school that I was most interested in high school was Babson, which had like the best entrepreneurship program at the time. Um, and it was kind of I didn't fully get that Wharton was so focused on finance. Like I'd heard of investment banking. I'm not sure I'd heard of consulting, but I didn't know what these things were. And so it was a bit of like whoa, like there's a lot of people here who are studying to work in like large banks, and like that's not something I'm interested in. So I was focused, but also felt a little bit like um, strange or something. Um, and in my freshman year, there was a required course. We called it OPA. It was the acronym was OPIM, OPIM, Operations and Information Management. And this was a class that was dreaded by most of my peers, but I loved it. And it was basically like, how can we use spreadsheets to to answer complex problems and figure out like supply chain problems, and the part of it that I really loved was that we would write these scripts, basically like it was like super simple programming in VBA, Visual Basic A. I don't know what the A stands for. And again, I loved it so much that I would like tutor my peers, and I was like, I'm enjoying this, and then so that's how I was like, I need to major in OPIM, and then I was a Management 100 TA. I think they've since renamed the class, but was always fascinated in the intersection of like business and people, and which is, I think, one way to summarize management. And then in terms of music, I figured I'm at Penn, I should explore other classes they have. And so when I was looking through like the different class options, I found this amazing music and technology class where you basically could like create electronic music as a class, which seemed like so much fun. And then I found this like intro to sitar class, which I hope still exists, taught by a professor named Alan Miner. They only had like a certain number of slots because we had to fit in a room and share sitars. But so I started learning the basics of sitar. And was like, I love this. I want to take more of these classes. And so once I did that, I was like, all right, I have enough that I should probably just get a minor in this.
Okay, very cool. And everything seems to be coming together in some way. So I would like to say that you had like a really cool Penn experience. You did music, you found your passion, which is something that I feel like a lot of people don't find like a class, especially those hard classes that resonate with them. So congrats, great job. You seem very smart. And like, what happened? Like, what were you like expecting coming out of Penn, like having graduated? I know you started Google there, but like, was that always the plan? Did you always know like, this is what I'm going to go into? Or were you like the rest of us and lost and confused?
No, I was very confused. I think in hindsight, it's easy to be like, oh, this guy had shit together. He knew what he was doing, but I did not. And, I went into Penn knowing I want to start a business. And then I was surrounded by hundreds of smart people who appeared convinced that as I mentioned, the right thing to do was like to go into investment banking or consulting. And I knew that I didn't want to do investment banking. It just didn't feel like right for me. But I was like, this consulting thing seems pretty cool. You work with other smart people and you consult in companies and whatever. And so I started getting like sucked into the tide of that, and came extremely close to working at a consulting company. But I still had that like entrepreneurial tug. I also fell in love with Apple, like millions of others at the time. They had released the iPhone my sophomore year, and I was just like completely enamored. I was one of the many that were like waiting in line and buying, the first iPhone. And it just seemed so clear that this was going to like change how the world worked. And so as I approached my senior year and decided like, I'm interviewing consulting companies, I should explore other companies. I tried to try to work at Apple. And I basically like emailed every alumni at Penn that I could find via some like internal database and said, hey, will you hire me? And heard a lot of friendly replies, but they were like, no, sorry, we don't hire people fresh out of college unless they have computer science degrees. I suspect that's probably changed because Apple's grown a lot since 2007. I hope that's changed. But then in that process, I kind of opened my mind to like tech companies as a concept, which people weren't Penn graduates weren't like regularly entertaining tech company offers outside of engineering in 2007 when I was recruiting. But that was also the year when Google decided to do on-campus recruiting at Penn for the first time. And so they came to campus, and I went to the sessions, and I was like, this company is actually pretty cool too. It's not the Apple I fell in love with, but it's kind of interesting. And so I interviewed there, and did the whole sell weekend dance thing with them, and I just kind of I fell in love in a way that I didn't expect, but I guess I would say like I had a realization that like what was important to me was not necessarily what was important to me was working with like really smart, creative, quirky people, even more so than like prestige and glamour and like whatever else comes with like working at a McKinsey or wherever. There's nothing wrong with that. It's more than just that, to be sure. But something like resonated when I visited the Google campus, and so I ended up deciding to join Google. Moved out to California, which I visited once for like a day. So it was a big change for me, but felt like a good leap to try.
Very cool. And you started as a product marketing manager, right? So being new to Google, like, are the magical stories that we hear true? Like, is everyone like super smart and kind and selfless in Google, or should we get a reality check? Like, like I just imagine you go there and then the golden gates open and then rainbows rain down the sky. Like, how accurate is my point of view of this?
Honestly, like at the time, that's how it felt, and that's how I remember it. I'm sure it wasn't as glamorous, and I'm sure like all companies evolve, and it's not exactly the same company as it was then. But no, it was pretty special. There were so to paint the picture, I started at Google in 2008 in September, and at the time, Google was like renting out buses from like a local like limousine bus company, and so they pick you up in San Francisco. You sit on this like very nice bus that they've like customized so that you got a desk and internet, and it's not just like basic internet. Like they put like some really smart engineers on figuring out how to like make bus internet really fast. And you arrive and you get this like amazing breakfast at any number of restaurants, and it really felt like utopia. So much so that my mom, who immigrated from Russia and lived through the USSR, was always like very skeptical of this. She's like, this is too good to be true. Like, this is not going to work. I've seen this tried before. And I remember she'd come visit me in California, and I'd take her to the Googleplex, which is what we called the headquarters. And she'd be like, this isn't right. I'm actually, on one of her visits, Sergey Brin was like in line in the cafeteria that we were eating at. And she was like, her mind was like blown that here's this like billionaire CEO, and he's just waiting in line behind everyone else. I think he was wearing Crocs or some like weird shoes, like just like a normal dude. No, it was really special, and people were really, there's I'm sure there's bad apples at any company, but Google just had, at least in my orbit, like just really special people who, yes, they were brilliant. A ton of Stanford alumni, which had a totally different vibe than like my like Wharton peers, and a ton of people who just wanted to like, even though it sounds cliche, they just wanted to like make the world better in some way. And so there were projects in flight early on as I joined that I learned about that just seemed like crazy. Like, I remember hearing about self-driving cars and that like Google's working on that. I was like, what? Like, that's bad shit. Like, that doesn't make. And now, like, a decade later, like, it's still not widespread, but many people have now driven in these things, and they seem to work anyway. So it was really magical, and it was a time when, like, fortunately, the internet was growing a ton, and Google was growing, and so they were, and Google was run by Sergey and Larry, who were not businessmen. They were very much like, let's invest and try new things. And so basically, if you had an idea you're really passionate about and like some minimal level of clout, you could like start a team and go work on it. So there were a lot of these like offspring new ideas being born. It was really an awesome time.
Cool. And did you fit into your role? Did you like immediately see like, oh, this is what I know? Okay.
No,
We're
Yeah,
giving
now
a
I'm
lot
painting
of
such
faith
a
as a
rosy
college
picture.
student, like we're all gonna be fine. But like, what happened?
No, I'm glad you asked that because, and it's funny how, you know, sometimes memory paints like a rosier picture, but no. So I joined as an associate product marketing manager. I didn't know what that meant. I had only taken like 1 or 2 marketing classes in college. I didn't really love the marketing classes. But it turned out that like the things I was learning in college were not the things that I did as an associate product marketing manager. And I had my manager when I joined was this amazing, brilliant guy, but he was too busy for me. He had a lot of responsibilities. He was like in the process of getting promoted, and so I was his most junior hire. He didn't have time to like meet with me very often, and I was a needy, college grad that like needed to be told like, you're doing a good job or whatever. And so I felt like, what am I doing here? I don't know how to contribute. I don't know what they want. And I remembered like doing short days at work and wondering like, is this for me? And it really took like, I'd say it took like 3 or 4 months before I finally felt like, oh, I'm actually adding some value somewhere. And then I started to like get my groove. But no, initially it was like, I'm lost. There's no manual. I didn't have like initially like a close mentor to walk me through things. And so it took a minute.
So I'm sure this is something that a lot of us feel when we first start working on something. And personally, I've worked with a lot of youngsters, and this is how like the initial process is. Is there like a switch that flips one day, or do you just get into the groove and you learn the ropes in a way?
For me, I think it was just like time. I remember actually, this is like jogging back memories. I remember like freshman year at Penn, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I think it just like, for me at least, it just took a period. It takes a period of time, which like has never been like less than 3 months, and probably has like gone up to like a year before I felt comfortable in any new situation. And yet it's important to like try new situations. Otherwise you just do the same thing forever. Since this is a Penn interview, this is reminding me that my first calculus exam in college, I got like a D or something. I got a very bad grade. And I'd always been awesome at math, or so I thought. And I just like what like it didn't make sense to me, and it wasn't clicking. And I was going to the lectures, and fortunately I was able to figure out like, oh, going to lectures is not actually the way I'm learning. So I just stopped going to lectures and just like did all the practice exams, and then like was able to improve my grades. But all that to say, it just no, I don't have any secret other than like it takes time, it's uncomfortable, but it's kind of necessary in order for you to grow and in order for you to try new things, to put yourself in those like slightly uncomfortable situations. And now, 14 years out of college, I've now like done enough reps of that, like jumping into something new, that like it's just a little bit more comfortable, which is true of anything. It's how like public, like I completely despised public speaking in any form for years, and then just after just forcing myself to do it again and again and again and again, it just became slightly less uncomfortable each time. And that's how you learn to do anything that's not natural.
Well, sorry for forcing you to do this interview then, but thank you. I feel like I'm learning a lot, and I'm sure our audience is too. So I will just continue your discomfort for the rest of the interview. Apologies.
No, it's good. That one plus side of this sort of thing is I don't see like a horde of people watching, and that just makes it a lot easier. I don't know if anyone can relate watching this, but sometimes it's a little easier just to talk it, to one person or to a screen.
Yeah, the rest of you just close your eyes so that we just can't see. Anyway, so like that is I think very true. I feel we all have like a period of like adjustment, of like those growing pains whenever we're starting something new. But you eventually, I think, did really well. I mean, like product marketing manager at Google, the fact that we know like that almost everything we use nowadays is by Google, I think you did a pretty good job. Like, thanks. And like going through that process of like getting adjusted, and then working and excelling in your job, and then deciding to, hey, you know what, maybe I'll take another job at YouTube being a product manager there, and then knowing that you have to kind of like restart that whole process. Why did you then decide to move to another company this time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I need to acknowledge that there were many, many, many more people who had much more to do with Google's success than me, and I mostly just got to like brag about stuff that engineers were doing to like the world as a product marketing manager, which is like a very easy job compared to like actually coming up with like the brilliant tech that powered things like Gmail and Google Voice and whatnot. But in terms of YouTube, so I was in a rotational program, which was like seemed cool, but in hindsight was like awesome. So any of you considering those sort of rotational programs, I would encourage it, because I was forced to switch teams after my first year. So I worked on Chrome for a year, and then I was forced to work on a new team, and then I worked on Gmail, and then at the end of that year, it's customary you move on to another team. But I ended up staying at Gmail until one day I got an email from a guy who was working at YouTube, a guy named Hunter Walk, who I didn't know, but he just said like, "Hey, do you want to interview at YouTube for a product manager job?" And I had always been like jealous of the product managers I worked with, because they appeared at least to have like the ultimate keys in terms of like deciding what features to prioritize. And while I loved my job, and like I said, I felt like it was like easy to be a PMM on like Gmail, where the product itself is awesome and I just need to like tell people about it, it always seemed even cooler to be like the person who decided like, I'm gonna prioritize I don't know, priority inbox or undo send, or a totally new email thing called inbox or whatever it was. But I'd always thought like, I can't do that. I don't have a computer science degree. Like engineers won't listen to me. So when Hunter reached out and was like, "Hey, do you want to consider this?" I was like, "Yeah, if you'll consider me, I'd love to consider it." And I'd made a lot of videos in college and before that, and was pretty familiar with the YouTube interface as like a user. And so I had a lot of opinions about how it should work. It's always easier if you're working on a product that you have like, that you're a target user of, because I didn't have to like analyze it and talk to customers. Like certainly I did do that once I went in the role, but when I was interviewing, I could just right off the bat say, "Oh man, I wish you did blah, 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 blah." And they were like, "Oh, these are actually reasonable suggestions." Like, and so, yeah, so I interviewed for that and got the role unexpectedly. And as much as I was loving my time at Gmail, I had an amazing supportive manager named Ariel Jackson at the time, Ariel Reinstein. It seemed like too good of an opportunity to pass up. And so I moved over to YouTube as a product manager. Again, like didn't know what I was doing initially. Luckily for me, I had like a couple Eng counterparts who were very sympathetic to me and like answered all my dumb questions and helped me get over that hump again. And it turned out to be an awesome move, both for my career, but also personally. And although it turns out product managers don't have like the full magic wand powers I thought they had, turns out like engineers own a lot of that. It was still like a really fulfilling switch to become a product manager.
Okay, very cool. Goal achieved, I see. Good job. And like in that role, you mentioned that before that you thought, maybe I can't do that if I don't have a computer science degree. But then you got this role, and then now I assume you have this team. You've got engineers who report to you. You've got marketing people who report to you. How was it like taking kind of like charge of the whole product and growing it in a way? And as you were new to the role at the same time, how was that for you?
So I was very lucky in many ways. One of which was I had a really great wise manager, a guy named Noam Levinsky. He had a really great wise manager, initially Hunter Walk, and then later a guy named Shashir Mehrotra. And I could kind of like follow what they did. And one of the things that Shashir taught to his like PM team was that the role of any PM when they join a team is note taker. Is like, your job is not to come in and be like, "All right, step aside. This is what we're going to do." Your job is to like add value in some way. Nobody wants to take notes. Fine. The PM will do it. You take notes and you basically the meta point there from Shashir was like, you have to like earn people's trust, and you have to like show them that you can be valid, you can bring value, and then they will eventually come turn to you. And so that's kind of what I did. And it was easier because I really didn't know like what I was talking about in many ways. So I just asked questions, tried to be valuable, take notes, tried to make my team look good. I was also really lucky that the team I joined did not have a product manager. So a lot of people will be stepping into roles where they have shoes to fill. And in my case, I was like icing, because they were doing stuff on their own, and they were like, actually, we could use somebody to go like, prioritize this stuff or talk to this other team or whatever else. So it wasn't easy, but I think I guess the one piece of advice I'd bring forward beyond Shashir's advice from that is to just be really honest with yourself and others about your strengths and weaknesses. I think there's like a temptation when you're young to like pretend like you know everything, but people see through that. And so I, rather than do that, I'd encourage others to just like say, look, this is what I'm good at. This is what I don't know. And people, I think more often than not, don't view that as like, oh, he or she doesn't know that. It's more like, oh, I'm glad that they acknowledge that they don't know that because I already knew it anyways. And so I kind of just took that attitude um, as I learned to be a PM, and I think that earned me the trust of the engineers and cross-functional folks that I worked with.
All right. Very, very good leadership advice, I'd say. And I think that that it's a different way of looking at leadership. Like we I think we all have this like view of a leader who sits at the front of the room and says, okay, guys, cancel your schedules. We're doing ABC. But I think yours is much more of an effective way. And on that topic of leadership, like you mentioned earlier that you were an end user, you have all of these kind of like ideas of like how it can be improved. And like as someone who has like who does like another startup other than this and works on websites and programs, I know sometimes like from the technical person's point of view, it's kind of like their baby whenever they build something. So it's kind of always hard to take feedback in. And you, it's kind of like the person who has to, like, it's your job to kind of like get them to adjust things certain ways and things like that. How do you communicate with these people who are building the actual products, who are building the very technical side of the YouTube infrastructure, and how is it learning to kind of like communicate and get them to take your suggestions?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's not easy. And I think the more like probably the more talented the engineers you're working with, the harder it is because like they are smart and they might know they're smart, and why should they listen to you when you like literally don't understand the language that they're writing like the code in. A few things come to mind. One, I think, is just like making it clear that you respect the value that they bring, and so that they feel like they understand that like you don't think that you know everything. And on that note, I think one of the arguably the flaws of Google's, and I don't think they do this anymore, but requirement of a CS degree is you might end up with more people who like think they know what they're doing, who like, but are not the best people at the job, even though they do have a CS degree from a top university. It's not universally true. What else? The other thing, like something that I've had to pull a couple times in my career earlier on, which like I didn't want to pull, but I had to, was to say something like, look, engineers, I wouldn't call them that, but look, so-and-so and so-and-so, we disagree on this. My job is the product manager. My job is to look after like the product experience. Like just the same as I wouldn't ever like go into like a code review of yours and be like, you should do something differently. I'm asking for you to like trust me on this one. And part of the reason that's challenging is just like a law of numbers. Like on a typical tech team, you might have like 8 engineers, 1 designer, and 1 PM. And so maybe 6 out of the 10 or so people who are all engineers like think one thing. And so it's like the majority thinks something, and you may be in the minority, but you shouldn't make decisions based on like majority vote in most cases. I pulled a similar thing to that with oftentimes the designer and I would feel the same way. And so it was easier and better in many ways for me to say, hey, everyone, like, I know you guys, and it was often guys, you guys disagree. We really should trust so-and-so, the designer, because he or she's a designer and like they know what they're talking about. And usually just like mentioning that, people will be like, oh, that's a fair point. Like, another thing I'd find is like, they'd give you a shot or two, and then sometimes you'd be wrong and sometimes you'd be right. And like, as a tactical example, when I joined YouTube, I was working on the video editor. They had this cloud-based video editor. It's basically like, how can we redo what, it's basically like what Docs did to Word. They wanted to do like, the video editor to insert your desktop video editor. And they were kind of like building out the features you'd expect for an online like NLE video editor. And I said, hey, why don't we simplify this? Like they were like, look, we have like exposure and brightness and 5 other things that all kind of mean the same thing to most users. And I was like, why don't we just choose the one we think users want, which is usually exposure, call it brightness, because that's actually what people refer to it at the time. And then I remember they were like, all right, we'll try this. We did some user tests. They came in and like person after person responded really positively to this. And they're like, oh, this guy Jason's not like a total idiot here. Maybe we should listen to him. And then we launched a simpler version of the product and it had a lot more usage. And they're like, oh, actually, this guy might be onto something. And so you just, I mean, this wasn't an overnight thing. You earn their trust. You need people who are willing to go out on a limb for you. But then over time, I think I was able to earn their trust and then gain confidence in myself to like make those bolder and bolder decisions.
Very cool. And I think that shows kind of like your experience of being the end user, and also how you bring that by saying, oh, people aren't going to know it's called exposure. You're going to have to use the word brightness and kind of like make it like something that someone who is the user would kind of like want to use and actually know how to use. So, okay, right person for the job. And you would have obviously been really, really successful at it because because you eventually went on to become, I think, head of product at Vine and eventually general manager at Vine. And like, off topic, how do they even hire for Vine? Do you have to have like a certain amount of like pop culture knowledge of like the memes that are circulating and they're like, yes, that's our guy? Or like, how do you even get to Vine in a sense?
So like many things, it was a weird twist of events. I had at the time I had moved, I was living in California working in San Bruno at YouTube headquarters, and there was in the course of a week, my then girlfriend, now wife's dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and my mom had like a freak accident, and we were like, wait a second, we have to be closer to family. They were both in Pennsylvania, and we were like, career is important, but family is even more important, and we need to move. And so luckily supportive managers at YouTube were like, cool, you can move, you can work remotely. And so I did that for a while, and then turns out working remotely sucks, as a lot of or at least it's like for me. It's like more when like the rest of the team is in person, and so you're just like the one person not in real life. And so I started to think about like what's next, and was connected through some coworkers to some leadership at Twitter. They had purchased this company Vine. One of the co-founders had to take a leave of absence for like health or personal reasons, and so they were looking for a head of product. And so yeah, I think, there was some amount of like, does this person have like some semblance of taste and understand like the mobile video landscape? At the time, memes weren't, memes existed certainly, but they weren't in the form that they are today. But did my interviews, a lot of it was like cultural, like, do these people want me around? I guess, I think. And then they did, or they thought they did. And then ended up at Vine as head of product, which was a fancier way of just saying product manager, because at the time the team was like 15 people, and so there was I was the head of product, but the product team was just me. There were no other product managers when I joined.
Okay, very cool. And again, Vine has been so revolutionary. I think like I can't walk down the street without quoting 3 Vine references. And you moved from head of product manager, however little credit you want to give yourself, to general manager, which is huge. You ran, I would say, one of the most influential social media platforms there is. It was the TikTok before TikTok in a way. So like, and hopefully nobody watches this video like years later when TikTok's not relevant. So but anyway, so like,
yeah.
Did you know that this was going to be such a wide hit? And what was kind of like the thoughts of you guys behind the scenes? Because we were all having a blast on like this side of the infrastructure and like on the users end. Were you guys like confused, or like what's going on, or like what was happening?
Yeah, I feel like I could answer that both. Like on the one hand, it was so clear at the time to me, and I think to like the Vine team, that like mobile video was going to be a thing. Like at the time, Instagram was already a thing, but it was only photos, right? And phones weren't super fast, and they were smaller, and so like video didn't always work that great. But it seemed just like obvious. And at the time, Vine had like went straight to the top of the App Store charts. So like on the one hand, I could say yes, it was clear that this was happening. There was no question. On the other hand, I could say it was not clear to me, and I think to most of us, that like this trend would continue like at the pace it's continued, and that years later there'd be a different app, TikTok, that was like the most downloaded app every month for like 18 months in a row or whatever. Like I think we knew it was going to be we knew it was going to be, we knew it was big and we knew it was going to be big, but I don't think we realized like quite the magnitude of it. And I think you can see that in like, in terms of like the size of the team and the investment that we proposed and that Twitter made. Like when I joined, we were like 18 people, and I thought we grew really fast because we were up to like 50 people within 2 years. But you look at TikTok today, it's like thousands of people. Like, so like there's that. But no, I mean, I think we all knew that there was like some special stuff going on in the community, user driven. Honestly, most of it was outside of our control, for good or bad. For good, because there was this like vibrant excitement from people. Like we wouldn't decide that like memes are going to be a thing, comedy was going to be big on Vine. Like people decided that. The bad is that like, you know, sometimes things would become popular that we didn't want to become popular, or that like as an example, like there was a period of time when like adult content became very popular on Vine, and we were like, well, that's not good, because there's a lot of people using Vine are very young, and that might not be the best thing for them to see. There was a time when like I remember one trend. This is like a weird one, but like there was a trend on Vine where people were like using magnifying glass to like burn like insects and ants, which just felt like a messed up thing to like become popular. But like there was a balance of like, how much do you curb this, like, but you also want to let people like do their thing. And so we tried our best to like understand what was happening. I hired people who understood it better than me, who were like deeply ingrained in Vine culture, and we would ask them to like help teach the rest of us on the team. We'd watch like a weekly playlist of Vines, to better understand like what was trending, why it was trending, what the origin of those Vines were, just to get a better understanding of like what was happening. Because even though it was, even though these were just, you know, 6 second videos, there was a lot of complexity behind, and history behind each one of these the memes that emerged.
Okay, so it's nice to know in a sense that if you trended enough on a social media platform, you'd catch the attention of the people working there. So that's a nice thought. Everyone who's creating content is now going to set a new goal that their videos get played like in a board meeting. So thanks for yes, but like
sorry to interrupt. On that note, at YouTube, when I worked at YouTube, one of the most delightful things was all the rooms were named after like viral YouTube videos, and so you'd go to a room and be like, what's this? And you'd find this whole like treasure, because it was, anyways, just to say, yes, like you absolutely will get the attention of like the teams behind them.
Okay, so new goal: make a YouTube video so popular they name a room after you. Okay, this video that will be up. Okay, guys, we've got to keep watching. You know. But, okay, very cool. And like, again, it's also nice to see that you guys are actually monitoring the things that are going on. You guys actually like putting in that element of like keeping in touch with your users, because that is kind of like, I would say, the thing that people love about social media. It's fast, it's you get connected with people you know and you don't know, and you get to kind of like keep that interaction going in a sense. And you obviously know a lot about social media and how social media works. You saw the rise and fall of Vine in a sense. But after that, I think you moved on to Twitter from like the larger Twitter organization from Vine. And was that a leap in any sense? Like Vine is very much youth centric. Twitter, you've got everyone and everything, all like from politics to jokes to saving shows every other month. So like, how was that transition for you to like broaden up the whole scope, and what did you learn from your time in Twitter in comparison to your time at Vine that you didn't see at all?
So Twitter owned Vine, so it was kind of an interesting relationship. And to be sure, I was always working at Vine while I was part of Twitter. I just became a director at Twitter in addition, or like whatever, at the same time as being a GM at Vine. But I was able to see a lot of what was happening at Twitter, and got a preview in many senses of like where Vine might be headed, like both in terms of like content policies. So like Twitter initially had a very lax content policy of like anything goes, and then they realized like maybe they need to be a little bit stricter, and in fact, when it comes to like video, you have to be even stricter. At the time that I was there, Twitter was just launching its own video product, and so they were realizing, oh, where we draw the line for like a bit of text may need to be a little bit different for a slice, a video. And the other big lesson that I observed at Twitter was like what the effects of becoming a public company are, especially like if your product is especially if your product's not like growing at the rate it once was. So Twitter had gone public shortly before I joined, and when you become a public company, you have to disclose certain public metrics like how many users are using your product. And that creates an additional level of like pressure to keep growing that number. Unfortunately for companies, you don't have like a direct, it's not like you can just say, okay, let's increase this 10% every month. Like, you're at the will of the people.
Just like get more people. I don't know, just like plant more people, I guess.
Well, that sounds like absurd, and yet I had conversations with like executives at Twitter who were like, okay, what can we do to just like make this like an even growth so that every quarter will grow by X million? And I'm like, I wish we could do like, and if we could do that, why wouldn't we just bring them all in immediately? This isn't like selling cans of Pepsi or something, like where you could make distribution deals and rely on people buying them. So that created a lot of strange incentives, I'd say, where Twitter started expanding this growth team, a team focused exclusively on growth. And while there were really smart people running it and working on it, it was bizarre that there was like a team working on the product and a team working on like the growth levers, which evolved into like email reminders and things that like maybe increase the number of monthly active users in a quarter, but like no like Twitter user out there is like, thank God for that email reminder on the 30th of the month. Like things that aren't really driving like direct value to the users. So anyways, I learned mostly from observation a lot of the strange things that happen when you become a public company. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. I didn't think of it that way, and I didn't think of the struggles that. So like as you said, it's not like a can of Pepsi. If like someone has an account, you can't be like get another one. Like I guess you could, but like
I mean you can, and companies do that. They're like, oh, we should use multiple, and it's like, this is bizarre. Like this is what are you offering?
Yeah, well, okay. And I will definitely think about that the next time I try to access anything on Facebook, and I should think that I should get another one just in case, like help them out a bit. I can do that. I've got a couple of emails, so you're welcome, Google. But anyway, moving on again from Twitter, you then went to Google again. You worked on their AR and VR department, or their division in AR and VR. That is extremely cool, and everyone now is looking at AR and VR as the future. I mean, it's kind of your past since you were there. So like, how did you kind of like come into this new role again? And is it as cool as it sounds, number one? And number two, like, okay. And number two, it's like, how, like, your job is kind of like coming up with these new products and things like that. So in a field where everything is new, how do you get that inspiration of what you can actually start working on?
I'd say like, if anyone watching or listening has not tried a 6 degrees of freedom VR experience, you should. So like the Oculus Rift or the Vive, those are 6 degrees of freedom, meaning you can like a Google Cardboard, you just can move around like this. That's 3 degrees of freedom. And then with one of like these, you could actually move around the room, and it's a totally different ballgame. And yes, it's awesome and it's mind blowing. And for a while, after I joined Google, I was just giving people demos, and it was like delightful for me because I could see people's just like minds get blown, and then it's delightful for them. So on the one hand, yes, it's as cool as it seems, I guess. On the other hand, like totally no, it's not as cool as it seems, because like as neat as this device looks and as magical as it is, 99% of the time it sits on the counter because like a lot of practical reasons. Like I put this thing on my head. I probably don't need to tell you, like I'm ignoring my wife and children. I have things I might step on. I say I'm thirsty. I can't find where, to move the mask up. So there's a lot of practical drawbacks. There's also just some like technological constraints that have not yet fully been solved. Although I think what attracted me to VR and to go work in this new role was that we were at this interesting time, and I think we're still in this interesting time where like it's not hard to imagine a world where like you have awesome pass-through video and you have like super high resolution displays and whatever else, but we're not quite there yet. It felt like we were looking at like the first giant cell phone, but we knew that it was going to become the iPhone eventually, and so like of course you'd want to work on that journey. And then in terms of your question about like coming up with ideas, I mean, it was a joy to be able to go into this new area and have so much freedom to explore new ideas without like revealing too many details about the types of things that we did. We basically said, let's come up with like a high level hypothesis, and then let's try many different experiments. Let's constrain ourselves to like 2 weeks per experiment. And it turns out, like most things in life, there's like diminishing marginal utility. And so like in 2 weeks, you can create a Unity demo that's like, that demonstrates a concept. And then it might take like 5 months to like craft that down to something you could like ship to a larger audience. And so we basically tried to like embrace that instead of fight it and say, let's just get the 80% concept down and test lots of different things and get a feel for them. And then after we've done that, we can regroup and say, okay, which direction do we want to explore? So that's basically what we did.
Okay, very cool. How did you build a team that was willing to try this out? I mean, like normally you go to work, you say like, this is my job. This is the thing that I'm supposed to do. And then you come in and you're just like, you know what? For the next, 3 months, we're going to like do different things every 2 weeks. We've got to finish at least like, we've got to like get it to at least a stage where we can test it out and things like that. And only then we're going to decide what we're actually going to do. So like, How do you like build and convince a team to do this in a sense?
It's a great question, and I think I had like enormous luxury of being doing this at Google, and it's part of the reason I wanted to do this at Google and doing it at Google New York. So Google New York is the second biggest engineering site for Google. It's quite large, thousands of engineers, but it is the second biggest, right? There's like way more people in Mountain View, and so like most, not all, but most like crazy new technology projects, self-driving cars, whatever, like will be born in Mountain View. Again, not universally true, but as a result, sorry, I'm just muting my father calling me. As a result, there were lots of engineers in the New York office who were working on things that were mildly exciting, but maybe not like crazily exciting. Like there was a massive ads presence in New York, and so I had the luxury of being able to
through nanobots. No,
what'd you say? Sorry, you cut out.
They weren't exactly like making like revolutionary. No, okay.
They were like optimizing ad exchanges. Like that's oversimplifying. I'm sure they were doing a lot more interesting things, but there were enough people there that I could like, I just printed out signs. Like there's internal like job postings, but I just printed out signs. Tried to make them eye catchy. So I think I found like old pictures of like famous people and then put like new goggles on them, and it just kind of looks like a funny juxtaposition. And I put them around the office and said, do you want to work on VR? Come talk to me. And I'm sure a lot of people were like, what are they gonna work on? I have no interest. But there were luckily enough people who were like, you know what? I would love to work on something new. There were some people who had like just been passionate about VR on their as a hobby, and they were like, sign me up for this. And so there was kind of like some amount of self-selection. But in short, there was no shortage of interest, which was amazing. And then so much so that I gave them some homework to like really test their passion. I was like, I want you to make any app in VR and show me the app. I think along some like high level thesis. And basically it was like people who were like really stoked about this, but would spend the next weekend or whatever, like coming up with something. And then a lot of people were like, I'm going to just stick with my day job. And so anyways, we were able to form a team of people that were like, amazingly talented, willing to learn a new programming language. None except all but one were completely new to doing 3D development, but like Google has a mentality of like engineers as generalists and that they can learn anything. And so these people basically just like went through some tutorials and learned how to develop 3D apps. And luckily they were really smart and were able to pick this up pretty quickly.
Okay, pretty smart. And kind of like getting them to kind of like self-select also, I think pretty much helped you out in like making sure that the people who actually came there were like, if they're crazy enough to look at a sign of like some old-timey wearing VR goggles, I'm pretty sure they're like crazy enough to like build VR stuff. So
yes.
pretty smart way of like getting them on board. And eventually you became director of product management at Facebook, which was your recent role. And tell me a little bit about this. You started this role, I think, just before the pandemic started, and you've been in it for most of the pandemic. So, how, in a sense, has all of these different experiences in leadership, in like bringing your ideas to the table, paid off now that you've got this, that you had this high position role in one of the biggest social media, if not the biggest social media company right now during a pandemic? Like managing a whole team remotely, as you said, kind of sucks to work remotely. So, like managing this whole team isn't an easy feat. So what were the things that you learned that helped you do that in the last year and a half?
Yeah. So even though I can imagine a picture being painted or like in someone's head of like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about and was so confident, blah, blah, blah. Facebook was like the first time that I went into a job and was like actually confident enough in myself to be like, I'm going to go in this direction. I'm going to hire a team. That's how I'm going to like, and I'm just going to do it how I want to do it. If we're going to have meetings outside. Okay, great. We're going to do things my way. And like, I had the confidence and I had the network to be able to say like, oh, this person I worked with back at Twitter was amazing. Like, you want to come work? And they were like, okay. And they didn't think I was just like a totally random. So they were willing, or someone worked at Google. And so I was able to form this hybrid team of people I'd worked with, people I hadn't worked with. And I was just like very clear about like what we were about. And it was slightly harder to form the team than Google, I think partly because of like the mindset of, because the culture of like Facebook and there's a little bit more emphasis for engineers on like metrics. And so I was like, I don't know what metric, like, not, I don't know, but like, we're not going to have any like objective metrics. We're not going to have millions of users. Like, if you want that, if you're concerned about being promoted, this is probably not the team for you. And that a lot of people were like, okay, so like, have a good day. But we did form a team, and then as you said, the pandemic hit, and honestly, it was terrible. Like I think some people really enjoy it, and there are elements of it that of working remotely that are good, but I didn't enjoy it, and I don't think my most of the people I worked with enjoyed it, and we just kind of hunkered down, and I tried to like make sure people were like mentally in a good spot and able to prioritize what they needed, and that meant like, you know, a lot of like days off for me and for people on my team, and like, you know, I heard someone make describe their job as I went from like a manager to like a therapist, and I feel like I did some amount of that, and it just wasn't, you know, it wasn't great, but I just tried to remind myself and my team, like, this is literally a once in a century thing, and like, if we're not our most productive right now, that's okay, and like, we are very lucky that like we are able to work at a job where like none of us are being laid off, and we're, you know, they're not lives at stake in our job, and so it's okay if we slow down a little bit, and it turned out that some of the things we were building were actually like even more relevant when people were remote. So one of the things we built was Collab, which is a collaborative music creation software, where a lot of musicians were stuck at home and wanting to play with others, and so we kind of accelerated things that seem to be even more relevant today, and so I think things worked out fine, but no, it wasn't easy. It's still not fun. I think for most people to work remotely, and I think we're going to see a lot of interesting, exciting times as people like return to the office and rethink like what working in an office could be like.
Okay, and nice to know that you're in the same boat with, I think, 80% of the population, and going like, oh, when is this going to be over, in a sense. So final question that kind of like, I think that all of us would want to ask, in a sense. What is the one thing about being behind the scenes of this whole tech world that you see that we don't? Like, I'm sure there's 100 things, but like, what's the one thing that would blow our minds?
I love that. I don't know if this will blow your minds, but I think the biggest thing for me is that there are just human beings behind everything that you experience, and I think it's like easy. It's easy to see a company and think, oh, Facebook, they're a bunch of scumbags, but like, or whatever, just as hypothetical. But then in reality, you start to meet people here, and you're like, that's a nice person. That's a nice person too. Oh, and I see how they made that mistake. That was like very much not good. But like, by and large, these are just like human beings trying their best and working in completely new territories. Like, nobody would have predicted what Facebook was today when Facebook started. The people behind these companies, by and large, are like nice people who want good things to happen in the world. I think there's very, very exceptionally few like just evil people, right? It's
So
just
there are
people
no
like it's.
characters, Scooby-Doo villains in the background of tech companies. All right,
There's not. I mean,
like all right.
there are people who were naive because a lot of tech companies were started by people in their 20s who didn't like know what they were doing. There are people who made like mistakes, and not to diminish like the effects of those mistakes, but basically like the short of it is there's people behind it, often like fewer people than you think, and they mean well and they want to like create a good experience. Again, like oversimplifying and overgeneralizing, but yeah, it's just human beings. And also, the other side of that is like there's nothing about Google or Facebook that can't be recreated. Like they Rome is not the biggest city in the world anymore, and Facebook and Google will not always be the biggest, and they know this, and that's why they like need to acquire companies and keep evolving themselves. But just to say like once you meet these people behind them and you realize they're just human beings, it makes it a little easier to imagine like, hey, I can do this too. Like, why can't I? Why can't you do this? And so that's the biggest thing I'd share.
Okay, very, very insightful. And I think the next time anyone's gonna angry tweet at Twitter, they'll think twice after listening to you and not like torture the poor Twitter admin anymore. So thank you once again. I think that this has been an amazing interview, and I personally learned a lot and have a lot more respect for all of the people behind the screens, quite literally. So thank you, and hope you enjoyed being on the show.
I loved it. Thank you so much, Harsha, and thanks everyone for listening. Bye.
Thank you. If you guys enjoy Changing Reality, we're on every Thursday evening on WQHS Radio here in the US, but also available to any of you all around the world. So until then, see you next week. Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.